Usually, when you hear a colleague talking about a catastrophic career mistake in medicine, there is this inherent expectation of, overt dramatic failure.
Oh, absolutely. The grand disaster.
Right. You picture a surgeon ignoring a glaring medical contraindication or, I don't know, a consultant taking on some disastrously underfunded private venture.
Or stepping willingly into a completely toxic department where half the staff are on leave for stress.
Exactly. We assume the threat to your career is obvious. You assume you can spot a bad opportunity from a mile away. The red flags are, well, practically eliminated.
They usually are, yeah.
But there is a paradox that catches almost every high-performing orthopedic clinician at some point, and it is really the focal point of our discussion today.
It's the silent killer of careers.
It is, because the most damaging career mistake you can make in your practice rarely stems from accepting overtly terrible opportunities. The real damage, the crushing, insidious burnout we see in brilliant clinicians in their 40s and 50s, it comes from accumulating a massive volume of perfectly reasonable, genuinely good yeses.
Yes. What makes this phenomenon so dangerous is the complete lack of a single identifiable moment of error.
Right, there's no smoking gun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is incredibly comforting to believe that career destruction requires a villainous antagonist, or momentary lapse in ethical judgment. We like things to be binary.
Good choices versus bad choices.
Precisely. But when you examine the reality of your life as a mid-career consultant, that binary framework completely collapses. You are navigating a landscape where the primary threat is not malevolence or clinical incompetence.
No, it's almost the opposite.
It is the opposite. It's an excess of virtue. It is the steady, unyielding accumulation of worthwhile endeavors that slowly bankrupts your cognitive and physical bandwidth.
So true. Well, today we are unpacking a fascinating stack of recent literature on physician burnout, pulling from behavioral economics papers, data from surgical colleges on consultant attrition, and deep clinical case studies regarding mid-career capacity. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be diving into this one. It's so vital.
Our mission today is to take a surgical approach to your calendar. We are exploring what is arguably the most undertaught skill in a medical career, which is the strategic art of refusal.
A vital, vital skill.
We are going to analyze the anatomy of mid-career burnout, the deeply ingrained psychology that makes you physically cringe at the thought of declining a request, and the quiet power of saying no.
And doing it without ruining your reputation.
Right. Critically, we need to figure out how you can do this without becoming difficult, without becoming unreliable, and without burning the professional bridges you might desperately need later on.
I think it's important to state up front that this is not merely a conversation about time management.
No, not at all.
Because time management implies that if you simply optimize your schedule,
Mm.
if you find the right app or the perfect planner, you can fit everything in.
The myth of the perfect color-coded diary.
Exactly. That is a dangerous illusion. This is a conversation about capacity, professional boundaries, and clinical autonomy. For mid-senior professionals, saying no is the razor-thin line between a sustainable practice that you actively design and a career that simply happens to you by default.
Which is terrifying.
It is the difference between leading your clinical life and being entirely consumed by it.
So let's examine the specific demographic of this burnout, because the profile is remarkably consistent across all the data we're looking at.
Highly consistent.
The clinicians who find themselves completely underwater by age 45 did not arrive there by being foolish. They didn't get there by being lazy.
Not in the slightest.
They burned out because they are generous, they are highly capable, and they are fundamentally unable to decline reasonable requests. Each project, each committee, each teaching role they took on made perfect logical sense in isolation.
And that brings up a concept we can call the paradox of competing goods.
Competing goods, I like that.
When you are a junior trainee, you're often shielded from the broader operational demands of the hospital trust.
You're just trying to survive the rota.
Exactly. Your tasks, while arduous, are highly directed and mostly clinical. You have clear parameters. But as you transition into a mid-career consultant role, the nature of the demands changes fundamentally.
Because suddenly you're expected to manage the system, not just work within it.
Spot on. You are no longer bombarded with irrelevant or menial tasks. You are bombarded with competing goods.
Like what?
Well, think about a deserving clinical governance committee or a colleague who desperately needs cover for a family emergency.
Or a complex patient population that genuinely needs a dedicated outpatient pathway.
Yes. Or a request to mentor a highly promising registrar.
Right?
Not a single one of those is a bad ask. In fact, they are the very definition of good, meaningful work.
And because they are objectively good, your immediate internal instinct is to jump in. There's no alarm bell ringing to warn you off, no immediate friction.
Not at all.
It actually reminds me of the mechanism behind microfractures in bone.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
If you look at a stress fracture in a high-level athlete, there is no single stress event. There's no individual jump or stride that causes the catastrophic failure.
Yeah, it's subclinical damage.
Exactly. Each individual load is well within the physiological tolerance of the cortical bone, but the accumulated load, the relentless repetition without adequate recovery time, it outpaces the osteoblastic activity.
The repair mechanism just can't keep up.
Yeah. The bone simply cannot remodel fast enough to repair the microscopic damage, and eventually you get a cortical breach, a stress fracture.
It's a perfect parallel.
But here is where I want to challenge the premise slightly.
Go on.
Are high-performing surgeons uniquely blind to this accumulation precisely because their baseline capacity is so incredibly high? I mean, do you just assume your bone density, so to speak, is infinite because you've always managed the load before?
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism, and the answer is yes. A high baseline capacity acts as a very insidious trap.
A trap.
Yes, because when you are highly capable, you operate with a massive buffer early in your career.
You can just power through.
You can take on the extra night shift, write up the case report, and sit on the audit committee without dropping any balls. Your physiological and psychological systems can handle the micro trauma.
Because you're 28 and running on adrenaline.
Exactly. But this creates a dangerous feedback loop within your department. What happens when you flawlessly execute everything handed to you?
You become a magnet for more work. I mean, the medical director and your clinical lead notice that you actually get things done, so you become the default solution for every departmental problem.
Yes. The reward for excellent work is always more work.
It's so true. It's almost a punishment for competence.
It is. The institution naturally gravitates towards competence. But your internal gauge for failure becomes skewed. Because you have always managed before, you assume you will manage again.
You're relying on past data for a future that is much more complex.
Precisely. You rely on your historical high capacity, failing to account for the fact that mid-career responsibilities are cognitively heavier and emotionally denser than the tasks you handled as a registrar.
Yeah, mentoring a struggling junior is vastly different to just clerking a patient.
Completely different.
Yeah.
But you keep running on the microfractured bone until the catastrophic failure occurs. You do not see the edge of the cliff until you are already in free fall.
So if the danger of this accumulated load is so glaringly obvious in retrospect, because every burned out consultant can trace their trajectory backwards perfectly and point to all the extra commitments, there must be a deep-rooted psychological mechanism preventing you from seeing it in the moment.
There is a very powerful one.
Because we're talking about highly educated professionals. You understand mathematics, you understand the linear nature of time, yet in the moment of the ask, all logic vanishes. Why does refusal feel less like a scheduling conflict and more like a profound personal betrayal?
To understand that reaction, we have to look at the very beginning of the medical training pipeline.
Right back to the start.
Yes. Medical training does not just teach anatomy and pathology. It is an intensive, decades-long behavioral conditioning program.
That's a stark way of putting it, but it's true.
The system actively selects for and then relentlessly reinforces yes people.
Yeah.
Consider medical school in your foundation years. The individuals who are rewarded, who secure the top decile rankings, who land the coveted specialty training numbers, are the ones who execute every single task perfectly on time without a whisper of complaint.
The hidden curriculum is absolute compliance. I mean, if the consultant tells you to scrub in, you don't ask about the educational value of holding a retractor for 6 hours.
Absolutely not.
You just ask which size gloves they want. You learn very quickly that your value is tied to your acquiescence.
You are conditioned to view compliance as synonymous with competence and professionalism. To refuse a task is to signal that you are not dedicated, that you are not a reliable team player.
Which is career suicide when you're a trainee.
Exactly. So by the time you reach a mid-senior level, you have undergone perhaps 15 to 20 years of this intense conditioning. The yes reflex is not just a habit. It is a neurological pathway carved deep into your professional identity.
And it is heavily compounded by empathy, isn't it? Because surgery might have a reputation for detachment, but medicine still attracts people who fundamentally care about patient outcomes and their colleagues.
Of course.
So when a fellow consultant is struggling and asks you to cover a trauma list, or a desperate patient asks you to squeeze them into an already overbooked clinic, saying no doesn't just feel procedurally wrong.
It feels like a moral failing.
It feels cold. Feels callous. I suspect most clinicians would rather accept immense, punishing personal costs than ever view themselves as lacking compassion.
That is the crux of the emotional trap. The cognitive dissonance of saying no is simply too painful.
Yeah.
You perceive yourself as a healer, a helper, a reliable pillar of the department. Saying no contradicts that self-image entirely. So to avoid the acute, temporary discomfort of feeling cold in the present moment, you mortgage your future well-being.
Wow. Mortgaging your future well-being.
And this introduces a critical cognitive bias documented extensively in behavioral economics, which is temporal discounting.
Oh, I was reading through the papers on this, particularly the work by Daniel Kahneman, and the temporal mismatch is fascinating. This is what we could call the May versus October trap.
Yes, the classic May versus October trap. Temporal discounting describes how the human brain values rewards or costs differently depending on when they occur.
We're terrible at predicting our future feelings.
We are incredibly poor at valuing the future. We heavily discount the time, energy, and emotional state of our future selves. So when someone approaches you in May and asks, could you present at this regional conference in October, it would be brilliant to have your insight on revision knee arthroplasty.
Well, in May, October sounds like a fictional realm.
It does.
It sounds like a magical place where I have endless free time, all my clinical audits are perfectly up to date, and I sleep 8 hours a night. October me is a completely different, much more resilient person.
That is the illusion temporal discounting creates. In May, the immediate reward is the social gratification of pleasing the person asking.
You feel flattered.
The ego boost of being recognized as an expert in revision knees, and the total avoidance of that awkward, cold feeling of refusal.
Because you just say yes, and the conversation ends happily.
Precisely. The cost, the hours of presentation preparation, the travel logistics, the time away from family, the stress of a looming deadline is pushed into the abstract future of October.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Because the cost is invisible and distant, the yes is overwhelmingly easy. But October inevitably arrives.
It always does.
You find yourself completely underwater, bitterly regretting a commitment you made 5 months prior. You have effectively stolen time and peace from your future self to buy momentary social comfort in the present.
That dynamic is painful to recognize because it is so universal. I think every single person listening has done this.
Multiple times a year.
Understanding that it isn't a personal failing, but a combination of institutional conditioning and evolutionary brain biology feels incredibly validating.
It takes the shame out of it.
It does. But validation only gets you so far. Overcoming decades of this deep-seated conditioning requires far more than just waking up one day and deciding to have stronger willpower.
Willpower is completely insufficient.
Willpower is a finite resource. By the end of a packed fracture clinic, your willpower is entirely depleted anyway. You're just trying to get through the door.
Exactly.
You need specific, practiced protocols. You need a clinical pathway for refusal.
If you want to break a reflex, you must replace it with a structured, predictable response.
Here.
You need an algorithm.
Right.
In reviewing the literature on professional boundaries and capacity management, 4 distinct patterns of saying no emerge.
Okay.
These patterns directly map to the most common situations busy clinical professionals face. We can categorize these as the fast no, the slow no, the substitution no, and the principled no.
Right, let's dissect these practically, because the theory only matters if it can survive contact with a chaotic hospital environment. I want to start with the fast no. I imagine this is for the obvious non-fits, the requests where your immediate internal reaction is a resounding absolutely not.
Yes, the fast no is designed for requests that clearly fall outside your clinical expertise, your current academic priorities, or your absolute capacity limit.
The ones that are just a clear mismatch.
The mechanics here are vital. It must be immediate, it must be brief, and it must be warm.
Okay, what does that sound like?
For example, thank you so much for thinking of me for this trust-wide working group. This isn't something I can take on right now, but I really appreciate the ask. Full stop.
Oh, that full stop is the hardest part.
This is the most critical part.
The urge to keep typing, to justify your refusal, to explain just how overwhelming your current trauma rota is. It's almost impossible to resist.
You must resist it. The greatest mistake clinicians make with the fast no is the elaborate apology or the unprompted offering of alternatives when they actually have none.
Why is that a mistake? Doesn't it show you care?
No, it shows you are open to negotiation. When you offer a long, convoluted excuse about your current schedule, explaining that you are covering for a sick colleague and your grant application is due, you are not being polite. You are actually inviting negotiation.
Oh, I see.
You are telling the asker, my refusal is conditional upon these external factors.
Right, so if the factors change, I can do it.
Exactly. The asker might then try to solve those factors for you. They might say, oh, we can move the working group meetings to a different day, or you won't have to do much prep, just dial in.
And now you're cornered.
Now you are trapped. Furthermore, a fast, clean refusal respects the asker's time. It allows them to immediately move on and find someone else.
They aren't waiting around for you to magically find time.
Precisely. Most importantly, it respects your own mental space by preventing a lingering backlog of unmade decisions. If you say, let me check my diary and get back to you, when you already know you do not want to do it, you are carrying cognitive baggage for absolutely no reason.
I see the logic. You cut the cord quickly but cleanly. But what about the requests that genuinely give you pause? The ones where it actually is a competing good, a research project you really want to do, but you aren't sure you have the bandwidth.
That's different, yes.
The fast no feels too dismissive there.
It is too dismissive. That requires the slow no.
The slow no.
This pattern is vital for requests that are highly relevant to your career or deeply aligned with your clinical values, requests that genuinely deserve deep consideration.
So how do we execute that?
The methodology here is to deliberately insert a pause into the conversation. You say, this is a fantastic opportunity. Please give me 24 hours to look at my current commitments before I give you an answer.
You buy yourself some time.
You take that time, you weigh the opportunity cost, and if the answer must be no, you deliver it clearly. You say, I have thought about this carefully since you asked. Because of my current clinical commitments, I am not going to be able to do this justice this year. I am sorry to have to decline.
Does the pause actually change the asker's perception of the refusal? I mean, if the outcome is still a no, does making them wait 24 hours just prolong the agony and make them more frustrated?
It fundamentally changes their perception, provided it is a genuine, reasonable pause.
So 24 hours, not a week.
Yes, 24 to 48 hours, not 2 weeks of ignoring their emails. The delay signals deep, genuine respect. It tells the asker, your request was so important that I could not dismiss it lightly. I took the time to seriously evaluate how I could make it work.
Ah, I see. It validates the importance of their work.
Exactly. When the refusal finally arrives, it lands much more cleanly. The asker rarely feels slighted because they feel they were taken seriously. The slow no protects the relationship while still rigorously protecting your calendar.
It separates the emotional reflex to please them from the logical decision of assessing your capacity. You have time to let the guilt subside before you answer.
Precisely.
Okay, the third pattern mentioned in the literature is the substitution no. This sounds like redirecting the request to someone else. I can't take on this audit, but ask my registrar.
The substitution no is highly effective, but it requires incredibly strict boundaries.
What do you mean?
It sounds like this, I am not the right fit for this panel, but I know Sarah Jenkins has been doing incredible research in exactly this area, and she would be excellent.
So you provide a very specific solution.
Yes. This pattern is brilliant because you are still providing immense value. You are solving the asker's problem, just not with your own time. Furthermore, you are actively sponsoring a colleague, which is a key leadership trait in any medical department.
I imagine the caveat here is that it has to be a legitimate fit. You can't just throw another junior colleague under the bus because you want to escape an uncomfortable conversation with the clinical director.
If it is not a genuine, thoughtful fit, it becomes what we can term a lazy redirect.
A lazy redirect.
If you point the asker to the newest junior consultant in the department simply because they are new and can't say no, and the task is totally inappropriate for their skill set, you damage your credibility on two fronts.
Oh, massively.
You annoy the asker, who quickly realizes your recommendation was useless, and you deeply alienate your colleague, who knows you just dumped your unwanted administrative burden onto their desk.
They will not forgive that easily.
No, they won't. The substitution no-so only works if it is a win-win-win scenario. If you cannot think of a perfect substitute, you must default back to the fast no. Never invent a substitute just to soften the blow of your own refusal.
That is a crucial distinction. It is the difference between targeted career mentorship and just dodging your own responsibilities.
Exactly.
Now, the final pattern is the one I find the most robust, the principled no.
The principled no is extremely powerful.
Walk us through it.
It involves establishing pre-stated, immutable rules for your professional life. It shifts the refusal from a subjective, individual decision to an objective, structural reality.
What does that sound like in practice?
For example, you might say, I have a standing rule that I do not take non-clinical meetings before 9 a.m. Or, I make it a policy not to sit on any hospital committee that lacks active clinical leadership.
Oh, I like that one.
Or even, I do not accept peer review requests during the month of August.
If we think about this in surgical terms, the principled no is exactly like a standard operating procedure or a clinical pathway.
That is exactly what it is, a calendar pathway.
When a patient presents with a specific set of symptoms, you don't reinvent the wheel and agonize over the treatment plan every single time. You follow the established pathway. It removes the emotion and the decision fatigue from the moment.
You don't have to decide. The principle decides for you.
Right. You look at the request, run it against your predefined principles, and the answer essentially generates itself.
The true beauty of the principled no is in how it is received by the other person.
How so?
It makes the refusal entirely impersonal. You are not rejecting the individual asking, and you are not even rejecting the merit of their specific project. You are simply adhering to a professional boundary you have established for yourself.
It's not about them at all.
Exactly. Human beings are psychologically wired to respect rules and principles, even when they would argue aggressively against a one-off excuse.
That makes total sense.
If you say, I'm too busy to join your infection control committee, they will try to convince you that it won't take much time.
They'll say it's just 1 hour a month.
Yes, the classic lie. But if you say, I have a strict policy against joining committees without direct clinical leadership, it is very difficult for them to argue with your integrity. They might be disappointed, but they will respect the principle.
It essentially creates a fortress around your time.
It does.
However, having the right framework, understanding these 4 patterns intellectually is only half the battle. Execution is entirely another beast.
The execution is where most people falter.
Actually opening your mouth in the corridor or typing the email and delivering the refusal is where the fear paralyzes most clinicians. The prevailing anxiety is that saying no will corrode your professional networks. How do you execute these refusals while actively protecting the relationships you rely on?
The delivery mechanics of a successful refusal rest on a few absolute pillars.
Let's hear them.
Be warm, be brief. Do not over-apologize, do not lie, and do not leave the door vaguely open.
Okay, let's break those down.
If we analyze the emotional resonance of a refusal, psychological studies show that the human brain remembers tone far more vividly than content. Coldness is what people remember.
So it's not the no, it's how you said the no.
Exactly. If your refusal is terse, irritated, or dismissive, that emotional sting will linger long after the specific request is forgotten. Warmth, on the other hand, is what allows the relationship to survive the refusal.
But how do you achieve that warmth over email without writing a novel? I mean, is it just a matter of adding, thank you so much for thinking of me, I hope the project goes incredibly well?
It is about acknowledging their effort and validating their work. You might say, I deeply admire the work your team is doing on this outpatient pathway, but I cannot participate. The warmth is in the validation.
You see them and respect them, even if you can't join them.
Yes. But that brings us directly to the second pillar, be brief. As we discussed with the fast no, long explanations are almost universally perceived as defensiveness.
Which implies guilt.
Precisely. When you provide a laundry list of reasons why you cannot do something, you are subconsciously signaling that you feel guilty and are trying to justify your decision. It weakens your position. The refusal must stand on its own 2 feet.
What about the apologies? I see this constantly in medical emails. I'm so sorry. I really wish I could help. Apologies again for letting you down.
It is a natural reflex born of that conditioning we discussed earlier, but it is counterproductive.
So no apologies at all.
One sincere, light apology is perfectly fine. I'm sorry I can't be of help this time. That is enough. But excessive apologizing shifts the power dynamic. It centers your guilt rather than the reality of your boundaries.
It turns it into a drama about your feelings.
Yes. It makes the interaction about soothing your conscience rather than simply declining a task. And practically, excessive guilt invites the asker to push back and try to solve your scheduling problems for you.
Now, I want to push back hard on one of your pillars here.
Please do.
You said, do not leave the door vaguely open. In hospital politics, isn't it just basic survival instinct to soften the blow? If the medical director asks you to do something, it feels incredibly abrasive to just shut the door entirely.
It feels risky, yes.
Surely a soft, maybe next year, or let's revisit this in the autumn, preserves the relationship better than a flat no.
I understand the instinct, especially when power dynamics are involved. But you must resist it unless you are entirely sincere.
Why is so dangerous?
The danger of the open door is that vague promises haunt your future calendar. If you tell the medical director, let's revisit this in 6 months, they will put a reminder in their diary, or their secretary will.
And they will definitely follow up.
In exactly 6 months, they will return. And if the answer is still no, you now have to reject them a second time. That second rejection is exponentially more awkward and significantly more damaging to trust.
Because now you strung them along.
Exactly. If you know deep down that you do not want to do this or that your capacity is unlikely to change in the foreseeable future, professional kindness dictates being clear right now. A definitive refusal allows them to close the loop and find a permanent alternative. A maybe keeps them in limbo and creates an unpaid debt in your own mind.
It is kinder to close a door cleanly than to let someone continually bump into a glass wall.
That is a wonderful way of putting it.
An unpaid debt in your own mind. That perfectly describes the low-level anxiety of a deferred obligation. You carry it with you into every clinic.
You do.
Let's tackle the white lie, the fabricated excuse, claiming, I have a prior commitment, when you actually intend to be on your sofa recovering from a brutal week on call. Why is this so prevalent in medicine, and why does the literature highlight it as so toxic?
It is prevalent because we are conflict aversive. A white lie feels like an impenetrable shield.
Because no one can argue with a clinical conflict.
Exactly. I have a clinical conflict cannot easily be argued with. But it is toxic because it relies entirely on deception, and the medical community is remarkably small and interconnected.
Very small.
If your fabricated excuse is discovered, if a colleague realizes you were not actually at that regional conference or that you were not covering the ward, it corrodes trust far more deeply than an honest refusal ever could.
You've gone from being protective of your time to being a liar.
You transition in their mind from being busy to being untrustworthy.
But what is the alternative when the real reason is simply, I am physically and mentally exhausted and I don't want to do this? You can't always say that to a hospital executive without sounding like you aren't coping.
You do not have to overshare your exhaustion, but you must use an honest framework. The most robust, professional, and honest phrase you can use is, I cannot do this in the kind of way it deserves.
Oh, that's good.
Or, I do not have the bandwidth to execute this to the standard it requires. That is not a lie. If you are exhausted, you truly cannot give the project the attention it needs.
It's completely true.
This phrasing is powerful because it frames your refusal as an act of profound respect for their project. You are telling them your work is important and therefore it deserves someone who can dedicate 100% to it. I can only give 30% right now, so I must decline.
It turns the refusal into a compliment regarding the importance of their work. Let's apply this to a very common high-stakes scenario.
I fear it.
Clinical mentorship. Imagine a bright, highly motivated junior registrar approaches you. They ask you to supervise a major multi-center research project. You want to foster talent, but you know your calendar is a disaster area.
This is the perfect crucible for these concepts. The yes reflex screams at you to accept. You want to be the supportive consultant.
You want to be the mentor you wish you had.
Exactly. But if you accept, knowing you lack the bandwidth, what actually happens? You cancel meetings at the last minute. You take weeks to review their draft manuscripts. You provide shallow, rushed feedback.
You end up deeply frustrating the junior and stalling their academic progress.
Yes. Accepting a mentorship role and then ignoring the mentee is a profound failure of leadership. However, if you look that junior in the eye and say, I think this project is excellent, but I am currently stretched to my absolute limit. If I take this on, I will become a bottleneck for you, and I cannot do this mentorship in the kind of way it deserves. Therefore, I have to say no, but let's look at who else might be a great fit.
You combine the honest delivery with the substitution no.
Exactly. Declining in that manner is a profound act of professional respect. You are actively protecting their project from your own lack of capacity. A mature junior will recognize that and respect you significantly more for your honesty than they would for a neglected yes.
Even with perfect delivery, warm, brief, honest, principled, and disappointed. I know that for a lot of listeners, the guilt is still going to linger. You send the perfectly crafted refusal email, and then you sit in your office feeling like you have let the team down.
The guilt is very stubborn.
To truly eliminate that guilt, we need a fundamental paradigm shift. It is not just about learning the scripts, it is about changing how you view the very fabric of your calendar. This brings us to the ultimate reframe of this entire discussion.
This is the cognitive shift that makes everything we have discussed sustainable over a 30-year career.
What is it?
The foundational reframe is this. You are never, ever choosing between yes and no.
I need to pause you there. We have just spent the better part of an hour talking entirely about how to say no.
I know it sounds contradictory, but consider the physical reality of time. Time is a strict zero-sum game. You only have 24 hours in a day. Therefore, whenever you are presented with a request, you are never choosing between doing the thing and not doing the thing. You are choosing between two yeses. And one of those yeses is completely invisible to the person asking, and tragically, often temporarily invisible to you.
We are talking about opportunity cost, taking the fundamental economic principle and applying it directly to a clinician's daily life.
Precisely. Every single yes you utter is an implicit, unavoidable no to something else.
Yes to one thing is a no to another.
And the great danger is that the implicit no is almost always directed at the things you claim matter the most, because those things don't have hard deadlines or colleagues aggressively demanding them.
Give me an example.
Let's say the clinical lead asks you to join a Wednesday evening clinical governance committee. If you say yes to that committee, you are implicitly saying no to going for a run. You are implicitly saying no to having dinner with your family. You are implicitly saying no to finally writing up that complex case report that has been sitting on your desk for 6 months.
We can call that the invisible no. It is invisible because the family dinner didn't send you a calendar invite marked urgent with a red exclamation mark.
Exactly.
The gym didn't page you while you were in theater.
The new request is loud, it is immediate, and it comes laden with social pressure. The displaced activity is quiet. So the yes reflex wins because it is reacting to the loudest stimulus in the environment.
It's just human nature to respond to the loudest alarm.
It is.
Yeah.
To counter this, you have to make the invisible no visible. You have to give it a specific name and a shape. There is a very practical, almost mechanical exercise outlined in the capacity management literature to achieve this.
Let's walk through this exercise, the concrete trade-off. How do you actually do this in the moment when the email is sitting in your inbox demanding a response?
Before you type a single word in response to an ask, you take a piece of paper or open a blank note on your phone. You must write down exactly, specifically what you will not do if you say yes to this new request.
So I write down the cost.
Yes. And the operative word here is specificity. You cannot write vague platitudes.
So I shouldn't just write, this will mean less free time, or this will worsen my work-life balance.
Absolutely not. The human brain cannot emotionally weigh a vague concept like less free time against a concrete, pressing request from a respected colleague. Less free time loses that battle every single time.
Because it doesn't feel real.
You must be brutally specific. You must write, if I say yes to flying to this conference in October, I am saying no to attending my daughter's Tuesday evening football match.
Ouch. That hurts.
Or if I agree to take on this extra departmental audit, I am delaying the data review for my own primary research project by another 4 weeks.
You have to force yourself to give the displaced yes a name.
Once it has a specific name, your daughter's match, your own research, your sleep, the dynamic completely shifts. The new opportunity is no longer competing against a vague sense of busyness. It must compete with the named priority on equal terms.
It levels the playing field.
You look at the two options side by side. Do I want to sit on the cross-site infection control steering group, or do I want to have dinner with my spouse on a Wednesday?
When you put it like that, it's so clear.
Most of the time, when you force the new opportunity to compete directly with a concrete trade-off, the new opportunity simply isn't worth the cost. The mathematics of your capacity become astonishingly clear.
It is an incredibly confronting exercise. It forces you to stop lying to yourself about your capacity. It strips away the illusion that you can do it all and forces you to take direct responsibility for what you are sacrificing.
Responsibility is the key word.
I imagine some clinicians might hear this and think, isn't this just a very cynical, selfish way to look at a career in public service or medicine? We took an oath. We are supposed to sacrifice for the greater good.
That is the ultimate trap of the medical martyr complex. But let's be entirely clear, this framework is the exact opposite of cynicism.
It's protective.
It is the active, deliberate protection of the things you claim matter most. It is about deep professional and personal integrity. If you claim your family is your priority, or your research is your priority, but you habitually say yes to every evening committee and weekend seminar, your calendar reflects a different reality.
Your actions don't match your values.
Your calendar is your true list of priorities. Mastering the invisible no is not about being selfish. It is about ensuring that when you do say yes to the hospital trust, to the patient, to the trainee, you actually have the physical and cognitive reserves to deliver excellence.
You aren't just a shell of a person showing up.
Exactly. A burnt-out, resentful surgeon operating on 3 hours of sleep because they couldn't say no to the late-night administrative meeting is not serving the patient better. They are a clinical liability.
Your calendar is your true list of priorities. That is a sobering reality to face. As we pull these threads together, we have diagnosed the mid-career trap, where reasonable, good requests pile up into catastrophic career-ending burdens.
Yes, the paradox of competing goods.
We have dissected the deeply conditioned yes reflex born in medical school and the evolutionary illusion of temporal discounting.
The May versus October trap.
We have laid out the clinical pathway for refusal: the fast no, the slow no, the substitution no, and the principled no. We have analyzed the emotional delivery, prioritizing warmth over defensiveness and honesty over toxic white lies.
Keeping the door firmly but kindly closed.
And finally, we have illuminated the invisible no, the absolute necessity of acknowledging the concrete opportunity cost of every single commitment you make.
Synthesizing all of this literature and behavioral science, the core message is that saying no isn't an act of selfishness. It is the strict, necessary discipline required to make your yeses genuinely meaningful.
It's about quality, not quantity.
The clinicians who master this, who embrace the temporary discomfort of setting firm boundaries, do not become unreliable pariahs in their departments.
They don't get shunned.
Quite the opposite. They become the rare, deeply trustworthy professionals who actually show up fully, with clear minds and steady hands, when they do commit to a project or a patient.
Because their yes actually means something. It isn't just a reflex of compliance. It is a conscious, fully resourced commitment. If you found value in dissecting these career frameworks today, please take a moment to rate and share this deep dive with a colleague who might need to hear this. Perhaps that colleague who is currently drowning in committee work.
I would leave you with a final, practical challenge for the days ahead.
What's the challenge?
This week, simply pick just one of the 4 refusal patterns we discussed. Find a request that warrants it, and use that pattern exactly once. Don't overthink the delivery, just execute it.
Just one time.
Notice how the sky does not fall. Observe the immediate, tangible space it creates in your mind and your clinical schedule. And then ask yourself, does mastering the word no actually make you a significantly better, more effective clinical leader rather than just a less stressed one?
The X-ray machine might be murky when it comes to visualizing the complex political landscape of a medical career, but the treatment plan for burnout is incredibly clear. Protect your bone density. Watch out for the microfractures of 1,000 good yeses. Talk soon.